I gripped the sleeve of my coat so hard the seams bit into my fingers. It wasn't to keep warm, I hadn't felt warm in weeks, but just to stop my hands from shaking. Across the courtroom, Derek sat like he was posing for a photo shoot, smirking as his lawyer paced slowly, deliberately each step, echoing like a countdown to something I couldn't stop. "She's broke," the woman said, pausing to look at the judge. "She doesn't have a stable job, no proper home. Her kids deserve better." Her voice was calm, cruel. Not angry would have been easier to defend against. No, this was worse. She spoke like it was already decided, like my love wasn't enough. I sat straighter but didn't speak. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't afford to. My court-appointed attorney had quit the week before, and no new one had been assigned. Legal aid said my case was under review, so it was just me, my thrift store suit, and the hope that somehow the truth would speak for itself. But truth doesn't speak when no one gives it a mic. The judge barely looked at me. He scribbled something, then glanced at Derek's side. I caught Derek's eye. He raised one eyebrow, as if to say, "I told you." That arrogant, polished look I used to find charming now made me feel sick. The lawyer kept going. "There's also concern about her mental state. My client reports emotional outbursts in front of the children, instances of instability. We have statements, instability." That word clanged in my ears. No one mentioned why I had cried in the middle of the night, with Luca on my lap when we had to turn off the heat for 3 days, and I wrapped us both in one blanket like a burrito. No one mentioned Arya's shoes with holes in them, or how I patched them by hand, until I could afford new ones. No one cared that I walked 2 miles to clean houses just so they could eat. I had love, I had them, but in this courtroom that didn't seem to count. I glanced back at the bench where they sat, Luca holding Arya's hand, both too quiet, too still. Luca's eyes were fixed on me. He didn't smile, he just nodded once, like he knew I was breaking, and that was all he could give me from where he sat. I wanted to stand up and scream, ask them where they feel safe, ask them who makes pancakes in funny shapes, or sings the lullaby in 3 languages. But I knew how that would be twisted, so I stayed silent, and the judge said, "We'll reconvene after lunch." But I'm leaning toward a temporary custody shift to the father, pending further review, lunch, as if this was just another case file. I sat back down slowly, the world buzzing behind my ears. My babies might not be coming home tonight. And then Luca reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The letter stayed in Luca's hand, but the moment passed. The bailiff called for recess, and he tucked it away again, like a secret. I didn't ask about it, not yet. I was too busy trying to breathe. My lungs felt like they were filled with sand. I walked out of the courtroom on legs that didn't feel like mine. The hallway was cold, sterile, and buzzing with whispers I couldn't hear. I sat on the bench across from the vending machine, watching families pass lawyers tapping on their phones. Normal people doing normal things. And I couldn't stop thinking, how did I end up here? I used to be someone. Not rich, not flashy, but someone. I taught community art classes. I had friends, a morning yoga routine, coffee shop loyalty cards. I used to laugh just because the sunlight hit the floor in a funny way. And Derek God, he was charming. He brought me roses to my first class, said my paintings made him feel alive. But slowly, like rust creeping over metal, things changed. First he said my job wasn't real work, that I could help more by staying home, that if I loved the kids and him, I'd let him provide. So I did. I quit. We moved to a smaller town to save money. Then the joint bank account became his account. My credit card vanished. The car was his company's. Before I could see what was happening, I had to ask for money to buy tampons. He made it seem like love. "Let me take care of you," he'd say, with that voice like warm honey. But it wasn't love. It was control. By the time I realized, it was too late. I remember the day he left. It was a Tuesday. The kids were at school. I came home from cleaning the Watsons' kitchen and found a note on the fridge. "This isn't working. I'll take care of the kids until you get yourself together." Get myself together. I had nothing left to gather. He'd taken the car, most of the furniture, even Arya's nightlight. That night I slept on the floor next to them. Just the three of us and a camping lantern. I applied for jobs no one called back on. Started walking to nearby houses to clean for cash. Sometimes I had to choose between diapers and dinner. I lied to the kids, told them we were camping at home. Made games out of washing clothes by hand. Smiled so hard my face hurt. But I never let them see me cry. Not once. That courtroom Derek's lawyer, she wasn't just fighting a custody case. She was fighting to erase me. And now I was one step away from losing everything. Back in the hallway, Luca climbed into my lap. He didn't speak. He just held out that folded piece of paper again, like it was burning a hole in his pocket. "Mom," he whispered, "I wasn't supposed to find this, but I think you need it." I looked down at the letter creased, smudged, and sealed, with something more powerful than any lawyer my son's belief that the truth still mattered. I took it slowly, and what I read made my stomach twist. The paper trembled in my hands, not from its weight, but from what it revealed. I scanned the lines once, then again, as if reading it twice would make it less real. Derek had written it like a checklist. Transfer remaining funds to offshore. Consult with Alan Ree Asset Concealment. Reinforce instability narrative. My name was in it. So were the kids. It was a game to him, a strategy. I folded the paper back up gently and tucked it into the lining of my coat right next to my heart. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just stared ahead, my mind reeling. I thought about all the days that led to this moment. The ones no one in that courtroom cared about. The mornings I woke up at 4:30 to scrub someone else's floors for cash under the table. The nights I boiled water on a single burner stove just to bathe Luca and Arya. I remember sewing patches on Arya's pants in the glow of a broken lamp and using cardboard to line the soles of Luca's shoes when they split in two. When winter came early that year, I layered 3 sweaters on them and told them it was a pajama party. I skipped meals more times than I could count. Not because I was dieting like the judge probably thought, but because I needed the rice to last 5 more days. Every dollar stretched like a rubber band about to snap. And yet I never gave up. Not when Derek moved in with his new girlfriend and suddenly forgot to send child support. Not when Arya got pneumonia and I couldn't afford the ER bill. I held my kids close and whispered stories I made up on the spot. About castles made of pillows and dragons who only ate vegetables. I told them we were brave, that we were the heroes of our story. I taught them to laugh even when our fridge held only mustard and baking soda. I taught them love wasn't about money. It was about showing up even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. But the court didn't see any of that. They saw bank statements and grocery receipts. They saw a woman alone, underfed, underdressed, overworked, and assumed I was broken. What they didn't know was I was unbreakable. I just needed one person to believe in me, one break in the noise. And maybe this letter was it. The bailiff called us back in. I stood, smoothed my coat, and gripped Luca's hand. His small fingers curled around mine like an anchor. I walked back into that courtroom not just as a defendant, but as a mother armed with truth. As I approached the bench, the judge barely glanced up, but then Luca stepped forward again. His voice was quiet but firm. "Your Honor, I have something you need to read." And the silence that followed was louder than anything I'd ever heard. For a moment, I thought no one had heard him. The courtroom, that echo chamber of polished shoes and sharpened lies, had frozen in place. Even Derek turned his head slowly, as if unsure whether he was dreaming. His lawyer blinked, caught off guard, mouth parted but speechless. "Your Honor, Luca." Repeated, stepping closer, holding the letter with both hands now. "I found this in my dad's office, hidden. I think you should see it." My heart stopped. I should have called him back, should have told him not to get involved. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Something in Luca's voice, the way it didn't shake, made me believe for the first time in months that maybe the tide was shifting. The judge peered over his glasses. "Bring it here." Luca glanced back at me. I gave him the tiniest nod, lips pressed tight, so they wouldn't betray how close I was to falling apart. He walked it up like it was sacred. The judge took it, unfolded it, and read in silence. His brow furrowed, then lifted. He passed it to the clerk. Derek's lawyer tried to interject. "This is inappropriate, Your Honor. This wasn't submitted into evidence," and Counselor the judge said, raising one hand, "Eyes never leaving the page, you'll speak when I ask you to speak." Her mouth snapped shut. The paper made a soft rustling sound as the clerk flipped to the second page. My pulse thudded like a drumbeat in my ears. They were reading the same words I had. Derek's words. Not some old diary entry, not petty complaints, but a blueprint of manipulation written by a man who had always seen people as things, tools, pawns. The judge's voice dropped low. "Miss Harlow, did you know about these accounts mentioned here, no, Your Honor?" I said, steady as I could, "I didn't even know he still had that safe. I haven't had access to anything since he left." Derek's lawyer leaned into him, whispering furiously. He said nothing, face turning redder by the second. I could almost hear him thinking, how the hell did Luca find it? The judge looked at Derek now, really looked. "Mr. Blake, can you confirm the authenticity of this document?" Derek didn't answer. That arrogant posture he wore like armor was cracking. His jaw flexed. He looked down, then up. "I'd like to speak to my attorney," he muttered. Too late. The judge sat back. "We'll need to recess for a formal review of this document, but I'll be ordering an emergency inquiry into Mr. Blake's finances and custody motives." That was it. Just like that, the air changed. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Luca walked back to me and sat down, still holding my hand, like nothing had happened. Arya leaned against my arm and whispered, "Are we going home?" "Not yet," I said, kissing the top of her head. "But soon." Across the room, Derek stared at us, not with victory, but with something he'd never expected to feel in front of me again. Fear. And I realized I wasn't the one on trial anymore. He was. And the truth had finally found its voice. 2 weeks, that's how long the court paused everything after the letter. 2 weeks of walking, on eggshells, answering calls from investigators, handing over every scrap of documentation I had. Old texts, emails, even a blurry photo I'd taken of our joint bank login screen. Before Derek locked me out. Every night I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had done enough. If that one folded letter was really the thread that could unravel the whole thing. It was. The judge ordered a full financial investigation, and like pulling on the corner of a spider's web, everything began to fall apart. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, hidden property in his brother's name, child support payments rerouted to a shell company, and worst of all, he'd been shifting funds out of a trust meant for the kids. Not just hiding money, stealing it from Luca and Arya. When the court-appointed forensic accountant testified, I swear I saw Derek pale 3 shades lighter. She spoke clearly, confidently, walking through years of digital footprints and paper trails. Every lie he'd told, every illusion of providing stability laid bare. The judge's expression was unreadable, but his silence thundered louder than a gavel ever could. Derek's lawyer tried spinning it, said the letter was taken out of context, said I was coaching the children, said anything, everything, grasping at straws that kept snapping between her fingers. But this time it didn't work, because now it wasn't just my word against his. It was evidence, facts, truth, weighted and undeniable. I remember sitting in court that day, not dressed in something borrowed or patched together, but in a simple navy blouse I'd found at a second-hand store, ironed the night before like it was armor. My hands were folded in my lap. My shoulders no longer slumped. And I saw Derek differently, not as a monster, not even as my ex, just a scared man clinging to the image he'd built, now watching it crack. When the judge addressed me directly, I sat up straighter. "Ms. Harlow," he said, "your patience during these proceedings has not gone unnoticed. The court acknowledges the strength it has taken to raise your children under extraordinary circumstances. Your character speaks for itself loudly." For a second, I couldn't breathe, and then he turned to Derek. "In light of this new evidence, I'm suspending Mr. E. Blake's custodial rights effective immediately pending a final custody ruling. A guardian ad litem will be appointed to represent the children's best interests going forward." Derek stood furious. "This is outrageous." But no one listened. Because finally, the courtroom saw what I'd always known. I wasn't unstable. I was surviving. I wasn't unfit. I was unshakable. As the session ended, I gathered our things, Luca's sketchpad, Arya's little stuffed elephant. They clung to me as we walked out. Outside, the wind felt different, lighter. We sat on the courthouse steps, and I let them eat the peanut butter crackers I'd packed that morning. They crumbled everywhere. Arya laughed when Luca tried to stack them like Jenga blocks. For the first time in forever, I laughed too. Not because we'd won yet, but because for the first time I believed we could. And tomorrow I would wake up as something I hadn't dared to believe I could still be free. The final hearing didn't feel like a battle. It felt like walking out of a burning building and realizing I had made it out alive with my children still in my arms. I stood before the judge one last time, heart steady, eyes dry. The guardians, the financial investigators, even the child psychologist had filed their reports, and for once every page, every line stood on my side. Luca and Arya weren't there that day. I asked my neighbor to take them. I wanted to walk into that room, not as the desperate, fragile woman they once saw, but as the mother who had endured, proved, and protected. The courtroom was quiet. Derek wasn't looking at me anymore. He sat with a posture I barely recognized, deflated, not defiant. His lawyer no longer spoke, with the fire she once had. She folded her arms and stared at her notes like they weren't worth reading. The judge's voice was calm, final, based on the presented evidence, witness statements, and the findings of this court. Full physical and legal custody of the children will be awarded to Ms. Harlow. Visitation rights for Mr. Blake will remain suspended, subject to psychological evaluation and review after 1 year. I didn't move, not right away. The words settled in like soft rain after a drought. I had imagined this moment so many times, prayed for it, in the silence between cleaning jobs wished for it, when Arya asked why Daddy had a bigger house. And now it was mine. When I finally stepped out of that courtroom, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt whole. It was strange. After so long being defined by lack, by absence, by struggle, I almost didn't know what to do with peace. But that evening, when I picked the kids up, I didn't say a word, just scooped them into my arms and let myself feel the weight of them real warm and mine. We didn't go out to celebrate. We didn't have the money for that. Instead, I made pancakes for dinner, burnt a few, laughed when Arya tried to flip one and it hit the wall. We danced in the kitchen, Luca's arms wrapped around my waist, as I spun them one by one, in circles, until we all collapsed on the floor in a heap. That night, while folding laundry on the couch, I found a new drawing tucked in Luca's sketch pad. A house, 3 stick figures holding hands in front of it, a lopsided sun, a crooked mailbox, a tiny caption written in big block letters, "Home is where Mom is." I covered my